Hi. Do you ever think about your bones? Or somebody else if that's more your thing? Either way, they are inside you right now, so you should probably start. I mean, it'd be weird not to. You wouldn't be here if it wasn't for them. They give your body the stability and rigidity to not just collapse into a miscellaneous pile of goo. But, hold on. If the whole point is that bones are strong and solid, then how does this happen? Or, actually, why does this even matter? Why do I care? I want to draw people, but I don't know how. So I have to start learning somewhere, and if I can figure out the basic shapes of bones, what connects them and how they move, then I can basically construct a human action figure to base everything else off of. So, there are a lot of them. Luckily, we only care about the ones that move. Even better, they're split into a few different types based on how they are constructed, which you can then abstract into basic shapes. But I'm really bad at remembering abstract concepts, so let's look for real examples anyway. The higher beings start with the hinge joint, so I'm also going with that. And it sounds really simple. It's a hinge, it just moves around one axis. And it feels like it's everywhere. Elbows, knees, my very real jaw, fingers, and so on. But I wanted to be sure, so I googled to confirm, and what the f is that? That is a fancy word for a ellipsoid joint, which is what's actually in your jaw, the base of your fingers and your wrist. It's sort of like a cooler hinge, since it can also move left and right. The only thing it absolutely cannot do is rotate. This is a pivot joint. It only rotates and is the one that lets you simultaneously whip and nay-nay by twisting a secret DLC bone in your arms. But that's pretty common knowledge. I already knew that before starting this. The bigger question is, how do legs work? The arm has a hinge and a pivot for the elbow and then a pivot and an ellipsoid for the wrist. It's nice and clean and it works. So you'd think legs are the same, so there's also one big bone, some joints and then two smaller bones. But the closer you look, the less sense any of it makes, because this area is 3 joints in a trench coat and all of them are awful. The knee is a hinge joint. That's simple enough. Then the kneecap is on a joint. Also easy. And then you have this thing. This is a plane joint, which just means that these two bones are smooth enough here to slide on one another. Now, to me, that sounds like a vague cop-out, but here we are anyway. Now with another problem. We have a plane, and a hinge. So, yeah, how does it spin? The knee is a modified hinge joint. And that is genuinely a fantastic bit of gaslighting. It's modified in the sense that it's so bad at being a hinge that it can rotate, completely disregarding the one requirement for being what it supposedly is. E tier, it is terrible, and it only gets worse. The ankle is a hinge joint secured by a plane joint. Which means that it should only go up and down, but then that's another issue, because then how does your foot rotate? I've rewritten this section of the script several times, because I just keep finding new stuff that confuses me. So I'm just gonna get rid of it. I do not understand how feet move, and hopefully I'll get it later on, but the fact that I already got stuck this early is a really bad sign for the rest of this video. Anyway, feet scare me, goodbye. And none of this would be an issue if we just had more ball and socket joints. You get a sphere, something that grabs onto it, and you get movement in every conceivable direction. The hips and shoulders were great, and I don't understand why every joint can't just be a ball. And then we have the saddle joint, which doesn't have a single good example that I could find, and I think is just a worse ellipsoid. So, we have hinges, ellipsoids, pivots, planes, balls, and saddles. Now, if you put them in the right places, then you can finally create a functioning representation of the entire human body. Because every single thing that moves absolutely has to be one of these. It's not any of those. But what it is really efficient. It's really important it controls where everything goes, but the build seems simple. We have 33 vertebrae that we can divide into 5 even sections. Those being the cervical with 7, the thoracic with 12, the lumbar with 5, the sacrum with another 5, and then the coccyx with 4.
The sacrum and coccyx.
Why did they name it that? And that's where the fun ends, because this means nothing to me. The spine has curves. And yeah, I can see that, and I can see that they get curvier the lower you go, but, well, what am I supposed to do with that? How do they curve? Are they symmetrical? Where is their peak? And how do they flow into one another? And this is just the default pose. How does all of that change when you move, and does it even change it? How does anything work? Sure, you can say that if I just practice enough, then I would get all of that by pure observation. But it just seems dumb to brute force something like that without at least a base understanding of what I'm doing. So let's look into it. And we're starting off strong because these do not move at all, they are fused into place. Good. The lumbar, also easy. Every vertebra can move forward, back, left and right and kind of rotate, but not a lot. Now this is where the problems start. Everywhere I look, I keep seeing that the thoracic spine can move. And that immediately makes no sense because that's where the ribs attach. How does it do that without them breaking? Well, Okay, listen, it's me again and I want to make something clear. You're watching this one continuous thing right now. And I'm recording all of it in one go. But those two lines of the script are apart. I don't know if I'm just bad at looking, but it took me so long to find anything that could convince me, because this whole thing genuinely put me in denial. The first animation I came across was here. This is the shadiest website I've seen in my life. And I had this long section here about, oh my god, that's so weird. But it's gonna be easier to explain if I just get to the point. Every time I look at an art tutorial, the ribcage is treated as this one big mass. And I don't think that's exactly wrong, but it gave me this weird conception that it is that. But it's not, because the ribcage is not real. Every rib connects to the spine by plane joints, which means that every single one of them can individually move. That is horrifying. I've never thought about that before. I've never thought about my ribcage moving, and I wish it stayed that way. But things are starting to make a tiny bit more sense. The thoracic spine can move without shattering the ribcage because the ribs also move. I had some trouble with how the ribs stay connected to the sternum, because you're connecting a bunch of individually moving parts to one thing that doesn't really move. And I didn't really find an answer, but I can guess that this cartilage just extends, and that's good enough for now. Wait, where was I? So we know the thoracic spine can move. But just because it can doesn't mean it does. Again, the higher beings say that most of what it does is rotation, but like, where? Because it doesn't feel like the ribs move that much individually, so where does the movement happen? At this point I have two theories.
Jeden.
Every vertebra rotates and the ribs attached to it just move to keep some sort of cage shape.
Kettő.
None of these vertebrae rotate and all the rotation happens lower, probably somewhere here. Option 2 sounds way more plausible to me, so now it's just a matter of leaning into confirmation bias and finding the right proof. So I found this table. I don't know what that means. It means I'm wrong. So I found this table of how much every vertebra can move. Can I trust it? No idea, but I'm desperate. Am I going to think about these exact angles while drawing? No! But it has actual data and gives me something to roughly aim for. Which is indeed what I wanted. And if I go just by this and nothing else, then the lower vertebra rotate the most, which makes intuitive sense. My intuition hasn't been right a single time so far, so this has to be it. And now all that's left is to figure out how that affects the shape of the ribs. The neck moves, but not evenly. There are 7 cervical vertebrae, but these two do so much that they got their own names. This is the axis. The pivot joint here does like half of all neck rotation. And this is the atlas, with a joint I could not possibly pronounce, but it does most of the nodding movement. Everything else is done together with the other 5 and it just kind of works. And that's the spine. Now what? None of this went to plan. I went into this video thinking that yeah, I can cover the entire human skeleton in one go. What could possibly go wrong? So that obviously didn't happen. And I don't have time to go any further now, so I guess I'm gonna awkwardly stop this here and come back in a few months. Yeah, this is way more complicated than I thought it would be. This tiny part took so much more time, and I didn't even learn anything. I don't even know how to end this now. This isn't the conclusion I had in mind. I'm just saying things to stall at this point. The music's probably going already. I'm gonna de-render at any sec.